Hello again. So, at the conclusion of my last video, you saw that one of my children was walking in and thus disrupted my thought process and getting you a decent video for the content this week. This week, I feel that the readings can be kind of heady. Well, that's because Um, that's a reason why I produced a lot of videos. When I left off, I was talking about Robert Kegan's Orders of Consciousness, and I allowed Kegan his own voice for 50 minutes if you wanted to watch the whole thing be heard. And there's a longer version too, if you wanted that. A lot of the ideas come from his research in his dissertation. He wrote this book, and it does a good job of describing a postmodern understanding of humanity. I alluded to this a little bit in our first week, where we as humans throughout history have, and maybe even like thinking about religion and science a little bit from last week, where we're striving for the correct objective answer. And that has some repercussions for our identity as people. So let's step back in and I'll try to work this through as I understand it. And I don't always claim to understand things perfectly, but and I tried to give you an idea of how Kegan thought about his own theory in relation to Piaget. I also added a layer of the Bronfenbrenner's ecology. Let's think first off of Robert Kegan's Orders of Consciousness. Try to get, and this is complex. I've thought about this, was exposed to this probably about 15 years ago, and it's helped me understand people, understand society better. And I would agree that Kegan is onto something. So, what Kegan is arguing for is that by the time we get to this third order, which is the socialized mind, we organize ourselves largely by the groups that we associate with. And we define ourselves by those groups. In other words, we tend to adopt the identity of the groups that we're in. I'm trying to find so I actually have the book I'm thumbing through, and I shared some illustrations with you of this concentric circle kind of understanding. And so this is taken directly from, let me make it bigger because I'm now need to stop sharing my screen. This is taken directly from his original text. How do I stop sharing? That would be a nice option. Hmm. Well, considering I don't have that coming up for me, there it is. Stop share. It's all the way over on my other screen, which is odd. Okay. So this is his own conception of what he's talking about. So you can see a movement, a development away from this where we're little bitty and we don't really perceive ourselves as an entity or other entities around us. We're just primarily impulses. That's going, I'd say, sensory motor, going all the way back there. He's talking about some perceptions and fantasies. To me, I perceive this all the way up to about 6 years old for Kegan. And then you have this concrete, and so for Piaget, I think concrete operational, where you can start to develop a point of view, and you can see some of those concepts highlighted in this diagram, in this table. And then what he sees in his own model is that people adopt, he's got traditionalism written in there. People develop into this stage three, this stage three of consciousness, or level three, where you have most of Piaget's oh, it's not all, not most of them, but all of Piaget's formal operational cognitive abilities. And so he has this like cross-categorical, trans-categorical understanding where you can kind of see yourself situated within a group, and you also see other people situated in a group, and you also see the differences. I identify with this group, they identify. And so it's almost like this. I don't want to simplify it to dualism because I don't think it's quite that simple, but it what it tends to do when you are stuck in this order of consciousness, it tends to almost lead to like a tribalistic understanding, like it's us versus them. It leaves room. It takes away room for alternative understandings. And so what he's arguing for is like our the point of our education shouldn't just be to get people here. It should be to get people to stages 4 and 5. What he found in his research is a majority of people in our society, at least in the early 90s when he conducted his research, were stuck in this stage 3. I would argue that's even either possibly even increased a little bit more. I'm not sure. I'd have to go back, but I mean, I'm just looking at kind of how he defined these ideas. We do seem awfully tribalistic since and stuck in our groups since the advent of social media and decline of reading and I'd argue objective thought. So he he wants us to kind of get to this level 4, which is good, where you see yourself amongst other people, amongst other systems. So you can understand the influence of systems, and that's where I like to really insert Bronfenbrenner's understanding, because I think that's a key component, because Bronfenbrenner starts to get us to think about all these systems that impact us and all these different things. And then so therefore we can have this complexity of thought that, oh, if that impacts us that way, it also must impact someone else. They also must have the same systems that impact ourselves. And I think that was my way of helping you enter into this stage 4 understanding. And then stage 5 becomes more self-transformational, self-authoring, where you can kind of step back and objectify, almost like you are leaving. I had a person in grad school who didn't necessarily read this book, but I heard this description from a person in grad school, and I loved it for the postmodern understanding. If you could take your own consciousness and acknowledge who you are, every influence that's, that's it's exerted, influence on you, your own thoughts, your own identity, your multiple identities. Each one of us have different identities, different roles. So take yourself, transport yourself above the cloud, look down upon yourself as equal amongst other people, amongst all of their systems, amongst, and identifying all their roles, all of the systems that are interacting with each other, and seeing that from an overarching perspective. I know that's really heady. I know that's a lot of abstract thinking, which you'd have to be obviously in Piaget's, you know, formal operational to actually kind of step into that. But that's the postmodernist thought. It's to deprioritize. And I asked about humility, right? At the very beginning, like our very first post was about humility, is to deprioritize our own perspective so that we can gain perspective of others and also the systems around us, the systems impacting us, and also the systems as they interact amongst themselves on this bigger scale. That's the best that I can say it in the fewest amount of words. I don't know of a better way of getting there. But what Kegan is really looking for in understanding, you can listen to him speak. He's obviously going to do a better job of representing himself than I am in that video. But it's this self-authoring, this self-transforming mind. And he saw very few people, elder leaders, mentors, systemic thinkers are able to get here. And I don't know, I mean, I strive to get here. I don't know if I get here a lot. I mean, I strive to, but it's and so what that risk then, I think what the fear then for people that maybe keeps them in three is you really have to question things. You really kind of, and so even thinking about our concepts, our sociological concepts, which we're thinking about group think and the out group in group tendencies that we have, and I think that those things were, ingrained in us socially, like survival of the species, like that group might attack us. So I'm going to be ultra like hyper vigilant and defensive and not accept anybody from that group. And yet, has our world changed? Should it change? We at least have an ability to conceptualize what it might look like if it were to change. I think that's important. So I hope that you've stepped into this with me. I hope that you've stepped into this depth of thought. That's really the challenge of this week, is to allow yourself the space to breathe, maybe put down your own identity for a while, not just maybe, try to, and think about these things as they impact us and they impact our systems around us. So you can also look at a summary of social development in Kegan's framework. If you put these several things together, uh, you see that he goes past Piaget. Really, Piaget is here with him. What he's arguing for in his theory is that, hey, Piaget left off that we mature and we get wisdom. And I agree that our neuroscience has followed Kegan's thought process here. And again, you can see how I overlaid the ecological layers. Built into this, I'm adding one more variable for you to think about. This is master's level thinking. So if you're struggling with this, I would encourage you to pick up some of these books, try to read them for yourself. In other words, make yourself engage with these thoughts for a long period of time. And that's when our synapses change. If you just, I mean, yeah, we can access it a little bit if we watch like a 40-minute YouTube, or yeah, we kind of step into it. But until you sit for a long time with another person's thoughts, hearing it in their own language, written language, sometimes I'll read a book and I'll hear the book in the author's voice, which is fun for me. And there's some of those books on that shelf behind me that I read and I hear the author's voice. Um, but you can get a deeper sense of what is meant. I shared James Marsh's identity development, and the reason I did that is because our own identity and our own identity as counselors and people, remember we have different roles, and wives and husbands and daughters and sons and all of the things, a worker or whatever professional role we carry all these identities and all these roles with us too that make up our identity. So one of the things that I'm asking you and that we're asking you of you in this program is to transform yourself into a counselor. And that's a transformational thing. You started here as a layperson, and you're transforming yourself into your part of your identity, one of your identities, into a professional counselor. This class should really, and this should engage you. This should challenge you, where it is a it's a struggle sometimes to figure out Do I align? Do I not? How do I feel about this? Please keep an open mind. When you fight with a closed mind, I would argue you're going to fall down into this. I'm just I'm defined by the group I'm in. That's what defines me, rather than letting you define you. And what your thoughts, what your cerebral cortex calls you to be defined as, based on the information that you're given. So James Marcia identified several four identity stages in development. I throw these in here because I see this superimposed over all these other ideas as well. He mentioned this foreclosure where somebody hasn't really had this identity crisis. I think Marcia would say sometimes when people go into like they don't know, they go to school, they get immersed in all this new knowledge, and they come out somehow different. Marcia, the identity diffusion, there's no exploration, there's weak commitments, it's self-focused. You don't really know who you are. A lot of this, I think I spent a lot of time just in my own life wondering who I was early on, especially your early 20s. Um, and other people have just kind of, they just kind of accept what was. So what I see from this being aligned with order three, this socialized mind, it's foreclosure. They haven't really questioned their identity or how they fit into all of these groups and all these categories. If they align themselves, remember, go back to some of these concepts. If we go back to uh, the concept of, let me pull this up. I'm sorry, I know I'm taking a minute to do this. If we go back to this concept of pluralistic ignorance, that means people have questioned, but they're still not allowing themselves the space to, they all believe it that others in the group accept it, leading them to conform to the norm they don't actually accept. People question these things, but then they fall in line because they think other people are just there along with them. And so, and some people might really like, according to Marcia, like they might really like believe that and get ingrained in that, but they don't question and they fight the questioning. That's problematic if you fight the questioning. I would argue that all those seminary books I have on my shelf would say the exact same thing. When you fight the questioning, it's problematic. Foreclosure. Then you have this moratorium, um, where a person explores and then commits to self-chosen identity achievement. Again, if somebody, I think what Marcia is saying is that if somebody really struggles and then comes out on the other side, where they're able to, yeah, you know what, I've gone through this period of questioning and understanding the different systems and understanding how different people are, my place in the world, and I've questioned it, and I've come back and I've gone up in the clouds, I've looked down on myself, and then come back down and been really settled. That's identity achievement. Please look through these other things. Please look through like fundamental attribution error. Think about these concepts that we've explored and how they relate to these biases and how they relate to these other things that maybe keep us in this third order socialized mind. Gang, I appreciate your attention. Thank you for bearing with me while I produce the other half of this. Please reach out. I look forward to reading through your discussion posts. I hope this has been engaging and continues to be. Please reach out if you have any questions. See ya.